Full disclosure before we start this video. So Gamers Nexus and Kit Guru both have run tests on this card that I'm going to be reviewing today. Basically, give their videos a check. I'm going to put links for them in the description below. In the meantime, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Remember when the A770 first launched and how a few partner models were announced? Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? Intel was happy as could be and the hype was real. ASRock came first with their designs, and shortly thereafter it was discovered that other partners were going to launch cards of their own. One of those partners was Acer. You heard that right. That pre-built company is making DIY components. Side note, they are set to launch AMD Radeon GPUs by Q4 of this year. Acer had never launched a graphics component outside of their pre-builds up to this point. Once I saw this, I had to have it. I need it! Today in this video we are going to review and critique the Acer Predator BiFrost A770. Seriously, we need to have a conversation about some of these long names. It needs to stop. This card was a bit of a surprise. When I first saw it, it intrigued me. A card with a regular fan and a blower fan? Well, now you have my full attention. Acer calls the blower fan 5th Gen Aeroblade 3D, while the RGB fan is called Frostblade 2.0. Both combined are part of their BiFrost tech. Cold stuff. Yeah, I know. Bad joke. I must say that I like the clean look. I do also like to peek under the hood to see what makes it all tick, which moves us into the next part, their teardown. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at this card, shall we? As you can see here, I'm just prepping up the bench here, as it were. Tools, they're always a necessary. Sometimes you can call them evil, sometimes you can call them useful. But joking aside, so as you can see on the card here, it's a wonderful black shroud. It's got screws on the top, got a nice little metallic back plate here. Great for holding the car. I just also want to point out it uses 2A pins. Now, the reason why the 2A pins is important is because this video card is the only one in question that can actually boost up to the full 235 watts of power limit that is put on all A770 models. So already we've got a unique flavor to this card that no other card has. Didn't try overclocking it, but we shall have to do that at another time. But here we are, and I'm doing a teardown of the card here by starting by taking the back plate off. And as we take it off, I just want to go ahead and kind of reminisce on something here real quick. I find it very interesting that Acer was one of the few brands to actually come out with a card that had a very, very unusual feature to it. I mean, think about it. It's not every day that you see a company attempt to do two different types of cooling technology on the same thing when it comes to, well, active cooling, that is. I wish this is something we saw more of. To be honest, I actually enjoyed that part a lot. Because I remember growing up, it used to be a lot different. Every card had a unique flavor to it, no matter how little or how much there was. Now we're getting into some interesting screw holes here. So as you can see, when I get to the edge here, it gets a little bit interesting because, as you will see later, I didn't realize how much those screws were holding together. But I thought it was kind of funny, nevertheless, that the heatsink was as long as it was. Now, here's the important part, though. As you can see here on the bottom of the backplate, we have a couple of memory pads that are actually being used mainly for like specific types of cooling for VRM related stuff. But most of the rest of the VRM actually uses thermal putty. That's the one thing you will see on this card is a lot of thermal putty. I'm not sure why they chose to do that, because honestly, thermal putty is a bit wonky depending on how you mix your compound. But as you can see, we have even more screws to go through, but at least they're easy to get to in this particular case. Alright, now that we've gotten those screws off, let's take a look at the underside of the board here, shall we? Oh, wait. Something is making this stick. I wonder. Ah, yes, boys and girls, you see that right. As you see, I still attempt it, but then it dawns on me, oh, wait a minute. There's even more screws on the side. Because little did I know, before I was starting to tear down this card, there are screws everywhere on this thing, including on the sides of that plate that holds against the memory on this card. So we shall take that off as quickly as we can on both sides, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Let's focus at what's underneath. All right, so as you can see here, it's very, very unusual design. So we've already talked about the fans, but while I'm taking the fan cables out, I need to point out the fact that this is one of the few GPUs where you will actually see dedicated heat sinks, separate heat sinks, that is, okay? So to clarify, from your screen, if you look at the heatsink that's closer to the right there, oh, showing off the fan. What can I say? 3 cables, 1 for RGB and 2 for each fan. Yes, and there's the manufacturers of each fan. Oh dear, my camera, there we go. Anyway, as I was saying, so if you take a look at those heat sinks there, right, they're separate. So each one of them has their own set of dedicated thermal pipes. So the one on the right is for the GPU die. That's how the GPU gets itself cooled, and that is cooled by the RGB fan that's mounted on the outside. Now, the heatsink that's closest to where the HDMI and display ports are, that has 2 thermal pipes going to it, and that is what is used to cool the top and bottom memory on the card. Now, I thought this was a very unusual design, not something you typically see every day. Most of the time, when you have thermal pipes running over a GPU, they are somewhat dedicated, but usually they go to the same heatsink, not 2 separate heatsinks. So, once again, Acer has proven themselves to have a very unusual and unique design. Alright, so we applied a little pressure here, and it starts to give out a little bit to where I thought I was going to be able to get it off. There we go. Alright. And now once again you can see here. So once again they're using thermal putty wherever there's anything to do with MOSFETs, power stages, or memory. And so definitely a lot more than I expected. But when the board comes into focus here, so as you can see from the bottom of this cooling plate, there's plenty of thermal paste to spare. And surprisingly, it was a very good compound. I mean, all that thermal putty and combined with that thermal paste, just delicious. What can I say? Now, I do have to take that bracket off that helps hold the shroud in place and make sure that the cooling plate can make good contact with the GPU die itself. It was a bit of a struggle because I also didn't realize that one part of that plate was still being held in place by yet another screw on the mounting bracket for the case. So here I am taking it off. So in order to finish getting this plate off, I had to take the I/O shield off. 4 screws were attaching it, and once those were removed, it was much easier to get this thing off. And once again, even more thermal putty for the power stages. Now we have a bare image of what the board actually looks like. As you can see, it's about the size of a RX 6600 XT board, or maybe a 3060 non-TI. Very basic, but here you can see that basically there's a total of 12 power stages that power the whole thing. And basically, to make a long story short, the memory chips that are on there are Samsung dies, and they are 2 gigabytes each, thereby totaling up to the 16 gigabytes total. Now, I will admit I'm always a sucker for matte black shrouds. This one is no exception. The blower fan was a bit of a surprise. I don't have a way to professionally measure the noise level of the room it is in. I do, however, have to say it was mostly quiet. Even at max performance, this card was mostly not noticeable against the background ambience. As for the RGB fan, it was definitely pushing air. From just a surface glance, it was hard to tell where the air was being sent. Now that we've gotten the hardware part out of the way, let's look at the performance. Now, instead of commenting on them, I would like for you to just read the charts, come to your own conclusion, here are the numbers, cue the music. Now, I'm sure some of you are scratching your heads going, wait a minute, what about the professional content creation loads? Well, here's the deal. When I was testing the card, AV1 support for OBS was not even added yet. Now, it has been added in and updated. I think in order to give this card the due diligence it needs for those applications, I will instead cover the professional performance of this thing in a separate video. The last thing I want to make mention of is the Predator BiFrost software tool. It was one of the cleanest tools I ever laid my hands on. It was easy to navigate and find the settings, tuning options, and other information you needed. Honestly, I enjoyed the software a lot, and what's even better is the stability. Never once did the tool crash, hang up, stutter, glitch, or do some sort of weird artifact on me while I used it. So many other companies need to take a page from Acer's book on proper software deployment. Side note, Arc Overlay is going away, and it's getting replaced by a single piece of software. This was confirmed by Linus Tech Tips a few weeks ago. All in all, as a gaming card, while the performance was good for 1080p and 1440p, this is a card I can only recommend at $350 in today's market if you are into more modern games, even with some extra tuning. Recently, Arc's pricing for the A750 was also adjusted. If this card continues to have a price that can beat the price of the 6700 XT or its cut-down counterpart, the RX 6700 non-XT, which has 10 gigabytes of VRAM versus the 12 on the XT version, then I could honestly recommend it for gamers just wanting to play mostly modern titles with very little in old games going all the way back before 2017. At the time of this video, the cheapest one you can get is $350. Otherwise, if you are doing anything else, I would just highly encourage you to check out the other vendors. Now, I want to close this video out by thank you for tuning in and watching, but I would also like to ask you to subscribe and share this content. It helps out a lot. Now, before we head out, it is confession time. I have been combing the forums, social media, and tons of other areas of the web for new information on the next title in the Mass Effect franchise. Well, I think I've got more than I bargained for originally. Nothing earth-shattering, mind you, but definitely, shall we say, things that could hint at something even greater. I will be providing that update down the road in a mini-vid. In the meantime, thank you all for tuning in once again. I am out. God bless and peace.